Breaking tonight, a political firestorm has erupted live on British television. And it all began the moment Keir Starmer described his deeply controversial budget as a moment of personal pride. Within seconds, TalkTV's Julia Hartley-Brewer detonated into what can only be called a volcanic eruption of raw, unfiltered fury. This wasn't criticism, this wasn't commentary, this was a nuclear-grade meltdown broadcast directly to millions, aimed squarely at the Prime Minister, who, in her view, has spent more time speaking about fixing Britain than actually fixing it. As Starmer defended a budget hammered by critics across the political spectrum, a budget linked to tax hikes, welfare spending spikes, stripped winter fuel payments, and a fictional budget black hole that has shadowed his government. Hartley-Brewer's patience finally snapped. She tore into the PM for endlessly making speeches while the country slides deeper into financial, economic and social uncertainty. Her message was blunt: stop talking, start governing. But what truly lit the fuse was Starmer doubling down, insisting that the budget was not a mistake, not a miscalculation, but a source of pride. Pride in a budget that many businesses, pensioners, farmers and middle-income families say has hit them hardest. Pride in decisions critics argue have done little but stoke national frustration. Hartley-Brewer reacted like someone hearing a fire alarm while the government insists the smoke is a sign of progress. She accused Starmer of raising taxes, inflating welfare spending, and then calling the fallout an achievement. It wasn't just anger in her voice, and it was the exasperation of a broadcaster speaking for millions who wonder why the Prime Minister seems more comfortable delivering polished lines than delivering real results. And before we go deeper into this political inferno, make sure to subscribe for more sharp, honest breakdowns of UK political drama, because this story only gets wilder from here. What happened next on that TalkTV set didn't resemble a typical morning broadcast. It resembled a pressure valve finally bursting after months of political tension. Julia Hartley-Brewer, usually sharp but measured, launched into an explosive tirade that captured a growing national mood: exhaustion. Exhaustion with explanations, with excuses, with endless podium speeches that promise transformation, yet deliver turbulence. Keir Starmer had barely finished insisting that Rachel Reeves had not misled the public about the infamous black hole in the nation's finances when Hartley-Brewer seized on his words with disbelief. The Prime Minister framed the chaos as an unfortunate starting point, a fiscal reality forced upon Labour, and yet somehow also an achievement worth celebrating. To many viewers, and clearly to Julia, it sounded like political theatre detached from lived reality. She hammered the contradiction. If the government truly wants to reform welfare, how does it justify pumping an extra $16 billion into it without structural change? How does it claim to protect families when pensioners lose winter fuel payments and farmers face destabilising tax changes? How does it talk about growth while hitting small businesses with rising costs? For Hartley-Brewer, the contradictions weren't abstract political puzzles. They were symptoms of a government drifting between messaging and mismanagement. Her frustration reached a crescendo when she mocked the PM's repeated declarations that he didn't want to see children grow up in poverty. Her retort, fiery, controversial and undoubtedly crafted for impact, accused Starmer of relying on platitudes rather than policy. The fury wasn't rehearsed. It wasn't a performance. It was the kind of unscripted eruption that only happens when public patience is stretched to breaking point. Every line she delivered carried the weight of a broadcaster who has listened to one too many speeches and seen far too little change. And for the first time in months, a morning political segment felt less like analysis and more like a national outburst echoing through a studio. The real turning point, the moment that sent shockwaves well beyond TalkTV, came when Julia Hartley-Brewer shifted from outrage to accusation. The PM had insisted Labour found a way to avoid breaching its manifesto, as if this was some heroic feat of discipline. But to critics like Julia, that explanation explanation wasn't a shield. It was an admission. It revealed a government that seriously considered breaking its promises until it became politically impossible to do so. Her breakdown of Starmer's defence was brutal. He argued that the OBR's productivity review shaved billions off expected revenues. He blamed what he called a difficult inheritance. He insisted his team made the right decisions in tough circumstances, but to Julia, it all sounded like the same script voters have heard for years. A government stuck on repeat, swapping responsibility for rhetoric. She drilled deeper into that contradiction. Starmer claimed the budget was a moment of personal pride. Yet the reaction from the country told a very different story. Farmers were protesting, pensioners were furious, businesses were on edge, middle-income families were being squeezed by taxes they didn't vote for and didn't expect. How could any of this be a matter of pride? Julia's voice sharpened as she attacked that very idea. Pride, she argued, is earned through results, not speeches, through delivery, not declarations, through leadership that reshapes systems, not television appearances that reshape headlines. And in her view, Labour had shown more of the latter and painfully little of the former. Then came her most devastating point, the growing sense that this government thrives on announcing plans rather than executing them. As she put it, stop telling us what you're going to do and actually do it, because you never actually do. It was the kind of line that stings because it rings true for a large swath of the public. Whether you're talking about welfare reform, business growth, housing policy or public services, many feel Labour keeps promising seismic change while delivering little more than tremors. But Julia wasn't just venting about inefficiency. She was accusing the Prime Minister of governing through speeches, a fatal political weakness. Because when a government becomes known for words over action, it loses something priceless: trust. And once trust starts slipping, it doesn't fall gradually, it collapses. What truly electrified this entire broadcast wasn't just the fury. It was how Julia's meltdown exposed a much deeper fracture, one that's been quietly widening for months. It's the growing belief that this government, despite its promises, its pledges, its polished speeches, is struggling to connect with the very people it claims to represent. And the moment Starmer described the budget as a moment of personal pride, that fracture didn't just widen, it split wide open. Julia hammered this point with merciless precision. She pointed out that while Starmer insists he's committed to welfare reform, welfare spending has risen by 16 billion. She called it a contradiction so blatant it borders on absurdity. To her, it's not reform, it's expansion dressed up as discipline. And for millions of taxpayers watching their bills rise, their wages stagnate and their costs surge, it sounds like political doublespeak of the highest order. But her fury didn't stop at welfare. She tore into the budget itself, highlighting the long list of people left bruised by Labour's choices. Pensioners losing winter fuel payments, families squeezed by tax thresholds that no longer keep pace with inflation. Farmers blindsided by inheritance tax changes, businesses bracing for NI increases, and rural communities feeling abandoned by policies that seem tailored to London boardrooms rather than British high streets. This, Julia argued, is why calling the budget a personal pride moment feels so tone-deaf. It suggests a government enamoured with its own narrative, even as the country struggles to keep up. A government congratulating itself while voters feel increasingly shortchanged. The optics alone, she said, were catastrophic. And then she delivered another hammer blow. If the government's defence relies on claiming that the previous administration left things in a mess, then at some point Labour has to explain why their solutions seem to be creating new messes. Her argument was clear. You can't blame the past forever. Eventually, the responsibility becomes yours. The studio atmosphere shifted from anger to something almost colder, a sense of resignation, a weary acknowledgement that perhaps the promises of stability, growth and renewal were never as solid as they sounded. Julia's rant wasn't just a critique, it was a reflection of a wider national mood. People aren't just frustrated, they're exhausted. And exhaustion is far more dangerous for any government because people stop listening before they stop voting. By the end of the broadcast, it was clear this wasn't just about one budget, one chancellor, or even one prime minister. Julia Hartley-Brewer's meltdown captured something bigger, a government caught between its own rhetoric and the harsh reality on the ground. Every speech, every promise, every moment of pride now carries the weight of public scrutiny like never before. Political analysts are watching closely. Can Starmer recover from this level of public criticism, or is this the beginning of a long, painful slide? Some say it's a wake-up call, others warn it's the first tremor in what could become a full-blown political earthquake. And let's not forget, the public isn't just watching from the sidelines. Millions are forming their own opinions, sharing clips, debating online, and deciding whether Labour still represents them. The key takeaway? Leadership isn't just about giving speeches or defending budgets. It's about results. It's about trust. And when that trust is challenged in real time on live TV, the consequences ripple far beyond the studio. Julia's unfiltered critique may have seemed dramatic, even theatrical, but it reflected the frustration of millions who are questioning whether the government can deliver on the promises it keeps repeating. Now the clock is ticking. Every policy decision, every public statement, every move Starmer makes will be under scrutiny. And as the country waits, the question remains, can he turn criticism into action? Or is this the moment where public confidence fractures irreparably? What do you think will happen next? Will Starmer regain control and restore trust, or is this the start of a government in freefall? Drop your predictions in the comments. I read every single one. And if you want to stay ahead of the UK political drama, watch every explosive moment and understand what it really means for the country. Hit that subscribe button right now. The next developments are coming fast and you won't want to miss a single second.